Welcome back to the Move with Matt show. My name is Matt Grabowski, and this is a place where you can learn how to create a sustainable approach to a happy, healthy, and pain-free life. On today's episode, I have on Edward Troise. Edward is a health and wellness practitioner, specifically a WEC method coach, which is something that fascinates me. This is kind of a branch of movement philosophy that emphasizes rotational movements, core coiling, rope flow in the RMT rope. And yeah, I know you guys are going to love this. We dive first deep into his history, which really fascinated me. His background with, his own mental health issues as well as his physical issues, which we really dove into, and you'll see is very traumatic and really fostered the growth into the man he is today, as well as his background with responsibility, becoming a recent father, all the fun stuff with that. And then we dive into the principles of WEC method, what they are, why they are so important, why they're necessary in movement routines, why rotational movement is so amazing. And then he is a very skilled rope practitioner, teacher, and we dive into why rope rolling is so important, who it can help, what the benefits are, and he's even offering my listeners and everyone else 50% off on his rope rolling course. So this is something I think you guys will love, this conversation as a whole, but you're going to love this. So let's get into it. All right, guys, so welcome back to the Move with Matt show. I have on my new friend, Edward Troise. Edward, good. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. This is one of our first times having an in-depth conversation, so I'm looking forward to getting to know you better, who you are, sharing your information, your knowledge with my listeners, with the world, and going from there. So thanks for being on here.
Yeah, thanks, brother. It's an honor. Doing podcasts with people that, we're friendly with online, but then really sitting down and diving deep is always a fun experience for me, whether I'm on the interviewing end or the interviewee end. So I'm really happy to be here. And again, it's an honor for being on your show, brother. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Maybe a little background of how I found you. Honestly, I don't know how I came across your profile, but I've been following you for a while, and something that I love about your essence on social media, and what I understand from that is, one, you are a WEC method coach. Is that the right terminology?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So WEC method coach, and something that you really emphasize is rotational resistance training. And I'm sure you'll do a better job at kind of classifying that a little bit as we dive into that topic. But taking this very sagittal plane movements that a lot of the bodybuilders and a lot of people, we all kind of start there essentially, right? And then we realize, okay, maybe this isn't serving my purpose of being pain-free, of being more functional, of being an athlete. And came across WEC method somehow, and we can dive into that, but it's something that I really value. I since have been introduced to them. It's probably about a little bit over a year now. I absolutely love what you guys are doing there, and taking all these different practices and molding it into my own unique way of my own movement practice, but also my clients as well. So Edward, why don't we dive into your journey, whatever significant events of go from when you were born to right now, however deep or shallow you want to go, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So a synopsis of my life up until, I guess, 2 years ago is how I'll kind of get to it.
I like it.
'Cause a lot's changed in 2 years. And much more happened in those other years. So I grew up overweight and very overwhelmed, very anxious, very shy. I was even contemplating suicide at a young age. I was very self-loathing. I had a lot of issues growing up. I grew up in a pretty unstable home emotionally and psychologically, not so much physically abusive, but just very tense. It was thick atmosphere growing up as a kid. And no matter who you are as a kid, you're sensitive. You only know your environment by its feeling, because you can't really cognize those things at such a young age. And so I grew up in a very anxious, tense, angry household. And that eventually kind of culminated to the age of 13, which is really where like I had a pivotal moment. So at that age, I was going into gym class first period, and I was getting these dizzy spells. Like I didn't know what the deal was. I would lose my vision. My vision would lose focus. I'd get kind of dizzy. Sometimes I'd have these hot pains like shooting from kind of my traps, and it felt like it would just harbor up in the backside of my brain. Very strange and kind of scary experiences. But at the time, because of the chaotic, lifestyle, I was just like, oh, well, I'm sick a bunch of times a year, like whatever, this is just normal. Things are happening, and no need to, kind of explore this, no need to share this. And I was always kind of like, I would hold stuff in anyway. So, right around that age, I was getting to a point, I was overweight. I was looking at myself. I was self-conscious enough to be like, something's got to change. Obviously I'm uncomfortable. Obviously I don't like myself. I don't like the situation I'm in. I feel like I have no control. Those kinds of life thoughts that you go through at that age. And I had my first breakup, and I was a mess, dude. I was miserable. I was chasing this girl, and then, one thing led to the next and led on, whatever. Broke up. I was devastated. And my mom's like, Eddie, why don't you just go for a run? Like, just go run. And I was like, at this point, I'm just like, whatever, I'll try anything. I go for a run, and I did 3 laps around my block, which is similar to a track field, or a field track. So about 3/4 of a mile. It took me maybe 10 minutes. And I could remember like going from those last moments of jogging to like ending with a walk. I had the most profound moment of my life at that time, of just like clarity, a moment of, the mind kind of settling, the emotions kind of running themselves out. And I just had this like urge, like it was something just bubbled up in me, like, oh, I got some control over this thing that I'm walking around in, And overnight, I just got obsessed. I got absolutely obsessed with trying to tame my body, because I was so miserable in it for the first 13 years. And that turned into like whatever information was available to me. That was bodybuilding.com. That was T Nation forums. That was all kind of like the introductory steps that we all have to like haze ourselves with sometimes as we go on the fitness journey. It's true. So I got really obsessed with losing weight first. I'd run obsessively. I'd calorie count obsessively. And that went to an extreme of like starving myself. So I got really thin in about 2 years. Then I turned 15, and I'm like, let me get a bench and some weights and stuff in my bedroom and start lifting and try and get more muscular. And then that eventually turned into just like YouTube video after YouTube montage after bodybuilding competition video. And I just got obsessed with like trying to shape my body. And so bodybuilding training was natural. So I joined a local gym, and I started training there pretty hardcore. And by the time I was 18, now throughout this whole period, 13 to like 18 and a half, I was also playing ice hockey pretty competitively. It wasn't a travel league, but it was a competitive county league. And, the match between bodybuilding training, right? A lot of bilateral, centered, neutral, stiff spine stuff, on top of the very athletic, intense moving, balance act that's ice hockey. I accrued a lot of injuries. So dislocated my shoulder at the age of 12. I had a girl fall on my head crowd surfing at a concert at the age of 14. I still have a displaced vertebrae actually from that compression on my spine. And then at the age of 14, I was BMX riding, and I fell, and I literally piked myself over the handlebars right into my groin. I had a golf ball hematoma and a ton of like scar tissue in my groin. Let's see, my shoulder dislocated like at least once a week while I was doing the bodybuilding training, because I was just careless, and I was like, oh, whatever, pops right back in, I'm good. No need to fix that. The amount of countless little injuries from ice hockey is, as you know, which is one of the things that we've connected on. Not too many people know what it's like to be on the ice and face to face with another psycho in a face mask cage, trying to kill you. Or blocking a rubber puck that's going 75 miles an hour and
Yeah.
taking it to your quad,
Yeah.
they're a little piece of plastic. But yeah, so just got beat up. And by the time I was 18, I cared far more about bodybuilding than I did about ice hockey. And so once I graduated high school, I was like, I'm done. I'm going full time into bodybuilding. At the time, I was going to a community college. I cared 0% about school. I was all about like, what could I do experientially to get me to my next step? And so I just went deep into the bodybuilding realm. I started to plan for a cycle of steroids for my 19th birthday. That was my plan. I was like, for my birthday, I'm going to hop on some juice. I'm going to get on stage next year. And the summer before that birthday, I was deadlifting with a friend, and I was actually competing for a natural show. So I dieted down for like 11 weeks. I was 135 pounds. I was emaciated. I looked like crap. I was like sweating out acid. My body was just so out of balance between all the supplements and the garbage quality of the nutritional, information I had available to me. And I decided to, for whatever reason, try and max out on deadlifts.
Perfect time.
Perfect time. And so at a body weight of 135 pounds, I load up 395 pounds in the bar and I just go for it. And I was using lifting straps because, of course, 135-pound grip couldn't handle that for a few reps. And I got so stoked at the top of that set that I went to go throw the weight down as like a celebration.
Oh.
And one of the straps let go, being my left hand, and then my right hand got caught. And so my right hand and my right arm started going down with the bar. Now the bar fell vertically, right, from like a hip hinge position, right? It's like right at my waist. And because my right arm went down with it, my left knee had to buckle in order for me to not lose my shoulder out of its socket, right? Because it's attached to a
right, just as
barbell.
the compensatory pattern.
Exactly. And so what happened was the barbell fell and crushed my left quadricep from free fall height, for free fall speed. My knee locks out, the bar slides off my kneecap and falls to the ground. Eventually, in that process, the right strap on my hand unraveled.
Mm-hmm.
I ejected from my body, which I recovered that memory later on in a float experience, actually.
Wow.
And the reason I'm kind of harping on this one event so particularly is this is the event that really like shattered my life and or started the shattering of my current like paradigm of life.
Mm-hmm.
So I go to the hospital, one doctor after another doctor after another doctor. No one wants to give me an MRI. No one wants to give me a second opinion. They're like, oh, it's a bruise. It's a hematoma. You're good. Come back in 6 weeks, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, it's like 8 weeks later. My knee's still swollen as it could be, black and blue as it could be. And I finally get approved for an MRI. And they're like, yeah, you tore your quadriceps tendon, 8 weeks ago. 2 centimeters. I tore off 2 centimeters plus the blunt trauma. So a lot of nerve damage and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I was just walking around. I was working at GNC at the time. I was just still doing my thing. I'm hobbling around like an idiot, not sure what's going on. But again, this also kind of like was foreshadowed by my lack of speaking up with like the whole dizzy spell thing, which actually turned out to be diabetes.
Wow.
Right when I was 13. So looking back at it, once I got educated, I was like, whoa, I was going through diabetic shock from my Aunt Jemima pancakes as a kid. And I wasn't willing to speak up, so I just kind of like ate it. And I was like, whatever, like, I'm screwed. I'm done, blah, blah, blah. 19th birthday comes around. I'm still hopping on steroids. I'm like, steroids are going to help me. I'm like, I'm going to be good. I'm just going to shoot myself up and this leg's going to heal. I go back to squatting like 315 pounds. For reps, I'm deadlifting over 350 again. But the way my body's compensating to avoid this traumatic, injury on that left leg, which only had a few months to heal by the time it was my birthday, absolutely messed me up. And so after that cycle of steroids, I was like, geez, like my body is so screwed. I'm in so much pain. I'm like, God, just help me. I'm taking my hands off the wheel. Like I need some help. And that spiraled into a new self-expression, experiencing new ideas of my identity because, I was so attached to that bodybuilder mindset. So that led to a lot of drugs, a lot of partying, a lot of degenerate kind of habits and things I would do. which all eventually led me to yoga, which I practiced pretty deeply for 2 years. And then yoga messed me up also. And then that got me to a point where at that time I was like, all right, I got to clean my act up. I'm off substances for the most part. I was like smoking weed and stuff still. And I was about to have my first child, my son.
How old was this?
We got pregnant and I turned 25. So this was between 25 and 26. And now I'm turning 28. So this is kind of getting to that 2 year period. So up until that point, like still a mess, still in pain, nothing's working, nothing's fixing my body. Yoga didn't work after it wound up making me worse off. No matter all the partying, of course, that doesn't work. It never works, never will. And so I'm about to have my first son and then he's born and I just look at myself in the mirror. I'm like, what happened to me? And now I'm this masculine example for another man or soon to be man,
Yeah.
And I just decided to clean my life up, decided to clean my act up. I'm like, I'm going to get strong again. I'm going to get healthy again. I'm going to eventually, wean myself off whatever substances I was using. And the last thing that I gave up was marijuana. Then that was like a big, 5-year long binge thing for me. And so I've been sober now for coming up on a year soon, which is great. My son's almost 2. And in that 2-year period after he was born, after I made that commitment to myself, which also I was vegan for those 2 years that I was doing yoga. So that was a whole other recovery journey. Once I got my strength back, all of it kind of lined up one thing after another. I found WEC method, I found the rope, and then I just dove into that. And the past year and a half or so, like November of 2019, I guess, was kind of when this all started catching some wind for me. And so from November 2019 till about now, I've been re-exploring and really re-solidifying my foundation in fitness and health and coaching again, and just getting into something that's actually going to be of service to people. I've run some men's work over the past year as well. Me and my friend did a 9-week course, meeting weekly. I was like kind of a transformational course.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that all eventually led up to me just mastering the rope and still in the process of mastering the rope and rope flow. Being fortunate enough to be mentored by David Weck personally. And then I met the other guys at the lab, and one thing after another has just led me to some really awesome people, yourself included. And life has really changed in those few years. And I'm really stoked for the way that this kind of path has gone through that deep dive and that dark night, and now it seems like I'm finally re-entering into something that all that was purposed for, right? It's none of it is victim, it's all just tough sometimes, and then we get to see it after the fact. So that'll be the long-winded synopsis of my story.
I love it. I love it.
Thanks for hearing that.
No worries. I love listening to that because there's a lot of things I want to dive into that. It's funny. My whole reason for doing this call was 1, to get to know you, but 2, really to dive into WEC method and rope stuff. But I think that will come later on in the conversation because there's so many things that I think we share in common. Not only our hockey background, but I also did BMX. And so when you were doing BMX, was that like kind of like skateboarding ramps or like the dirt jumps racing?
More just street stuff, honestly.
Okay.
Like just cruising around 25 miles a day with my boys and, hitting little waxed edges and, just messing myself up. I was never great. I could hop pretty high, but it was more just like street stuff, teenage kids just kind of messing around.
Yeah. I also had a pretty bad, I got a dirt bike when I was in 5th grade, and it was like a 50 cc, like so small, but I mean, like relatively for my size, it was fine. And I like the first 3 days we were hitting jumps in our backyard, slammed on the front brake on accident, went right over, stitches all in my hand. So been there. It's not fun to fly over the handlebars of a bike of any kind. So I empathize with you on that. But something I want to dive into just because it's fresh in my mind. I want to get back to the injuries because I think that's really important. And I myself had some pretty traumatic lower body injuries as well. But Something that you just said, I was listening to Jordan Peterson. Are you familiar with him? Cool. And Russell Brand and Michaela Peterson talk on their podcast they just did. And something that Jordan, man, he's such a wise guy, but something that he was talking about with Russell was, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, because you were basically talking about how when your son was born, do you have one son or two sons?
Just one.
Okay. You said your first son, so I didn't know if there was
plans,
yes,
but nothing in the oven just yet.
Yeah. I love it. But so, something that he talks about, and I'd love to get your thoughts if you kind of feel the same way, is that, like, from what I heard, you said you to like look yourself in the mirror and your worldview kind of changed. And what Jordan kind of says is you realize that you're no longer the most important person in your life, right? There is now someone else that is more important than you, that you now have to kind of, your whole worldview it's not you anymore. It's this other being that you have to take care of and you have to kind of be responsible for. So do you think that you kind of parallel with that?
Yeah, I would just maybe rephrase it from my own perspective as he's the reason why I am the most important person to myself now.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
Like I need to step up because of there's something I think to be said, particularly for men. And this is kind of some of the men's work stuff I'll just touch on, of being self-motivated. Having inspiration from outside, but really cultivating it from within. So, my son is a large part of my why, but what I'm going to do because of that why is still on me. And so, anytime we source some kind of motivation or drive externally, it always dulls out a lot quicker. And so I would say more so for me, that realization in the mirror is like, okay, I am a pathetic example of who I could be for my son. And so here's my time to really step up that self responsibility and step into who I want him to be looking at for me. And then of course for him, for my fiance and everyone else involved.
Yeah. And I think that, like, for most people, something that I learned in the Czech Institute, and it's just like a philosophy, it's not an end all be all, but is like we have I goals, we goals, and all goals. I goals are based solely around you. We goals are based around you and another person, and all goals are based around, more than two people. And there's always got to be an I goal, or at least it should be an I goal at the front. And I think you kind of empathize that of like, you have to take care of yourself and maximize your ability to reach your true potential in order to provide and take on that responsibility in order to be a good role model for your son, to provide for your family in financially, but also energetically and just like spiritually also as well. So I love that. I don't have any sons myself, but my girlfriend and I kind of just like brought up the topic, and we actually just celebrated our second year. Woo. But she was like, you want to have kids, right? And I was like, fuck yeah, I want to have kids. Like, I'm very evolutionary biology, anthropology inclined to think about things. And man, it's powerful to realize that you're creating something that's more than you, and that, like, your legacy will live on through him, and it's your complete responsibility you're essentially molding him, right? And I just find that powerful for men, especially, to take on that responsibility, because I think that lack of responsibility is something that's really damaging our society, at least Western society, as a whole right now.
Yeah, absolutely. The world is missing fathers, missing strong fathers, strong men. 40-50% of kids are growing up without dads right now. And
Exactly.
that's only ever going to create a degenerate, 90-something% of prison inmates are fatherless. So it's like, you want to clean up the prison system, get some strong men in the house again.
Yeah, true. Okay, cool. So we kind of handled that little
Yeah.
aspect. No worries. I love it. I'm diving more into kind of focusing more on coaching men, because I think that that's where I get a lot of energy from coaching young guys. I have a few clients that are 12 years old, and they really motivate me to be a better coach and to also simplify a lot of the stuff I've been coaching. them on the ropes a little bit. And it's just really cool to also like to be able to, I realized once I started coaching the ropes a little bit and teaching some of my friends this stuff, I was like, holy crap, this is way different than teaching exercises, like typical exercise. Cause you're like, yeah, everything moves together and it's just so, we'll dive into it. We don't have to dive into that right now, but yeah, it's just being a mentor and being a coach is something that's really, centered around my why of being service to my clients, but also the community in the world as a whole. Um, so something that I wanted to talk about was, so this injury, right? So we go through this kind of pretty intense traumatic injury that left this shock in your body, right? By dropping a barbell on it, on your leg. And then kind of people being like, no, it's not really anything. And you're like, no, it's definitely something. Right. And then that completely shifted your worldview. And, I shattered my femur snowboarding when I was younger and had to get a rod placed through my leg, screws in my knee, screws in my hip. And I actually started diving more into strength training after that. I definitely had some experiences kind of just based around hockey of more like dry land trading and like, let's hit some weights. But that was like my rehab and strength training after that was really my foundation of weightlifting and what inspired me, I believe, to go down this route. So maybe dive into like, you know, what went through your mind when they told you like your quad tendon is torn, and then also because you have some experiential knowledge, was like, oh, this is bad, like, and then what you knew, like energetically, like how you felt and how you like progressed through that.
Yeah, sure. So I'll kind of rewind it to the moment it happened, where it was one of those moments where it's like I fell to the floor and I looked around and I'm like like how bad is this? Because
Mm-hmm.
this is bad right now. Like I blacked out for a moment, kind of thing, like lost it, and then I crawled away and I sat down and I'm screaming and I'm crying and I'm in the middle of the gym,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just kind of doing this weird self-assessment kind of thing. And so I feel like those moments, like immediately after impact or after injury, where it's like you're taken back, right? And then I got drugged up in the ambulance, and so I'm just kind of watching all this unfold. And then really, I think what it did for me beyond that, like how I kind of progressed through that, was I'd always been used to um, poor advice from people in coats with letters on it. And so I was like, well, it doesn't surprise me anymore, that for whatever reason they're not giving me an MRI. And so I was just kind of trusting the process. I'd been through enough in my life at that point, even at a young age of 18 turning 19, where I kind of knew there was some purpose for this. I didn't know what it was yet, but there was a part of my spirit that was just like, hey man, like just keep trudging along and keep doing your thing, and this will all work out. And so I did have a belief in this massive trauma, and I think it was really just from experiencing a lot of the trauma as like a bystander with my family. My mom has a very strong faith, and was always that kind of like angelic voice of like, hey, everything has a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of suffering, but suffering, leads to something, whatever, whenever, wherever that might lead to it. There's always something going on there on a larger plan. She would always tell me like God has a plan for you, a bigger plan than you could understand. And so those seeds were starting to be germinated in that phase, because this was something so serious that it was like an identity crisis. I couldn't comprehend where or what this was going to become or where this was going to go. And so I had that in the back of my mind throughout all of it. And one thing that it really did make me do, dude, is I had to pay attention to every single step that I took. Every step. Because I had this drive. Oh my God, this is not going to stop me. I'm going to make this better. So how am I going to make this better? I need to become violently aware of this thing.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I really do love, one of Paul Chek's kind of go-to quotes is how pain speeds up consciousness. And that is one of the truest things that has ever come out of that man's mouth. And that was my kind of, unbeknownst to me at the time of that kind of idea, like that's literally what was happening to me. And so I just became hyper aware, hyper connected to my body. And so, one of those things, like, although it technically messed up my physical body, I had never been that connected to it at the same time. And it was that connection and that drive of like, okay, there's a plan in this, there's a reason for this, that just was enough to keep me going. Amongst all the partying and all the other stuff I was doing on the surface, there was that little seed that was getting its fertilizer at the time. And so, yeah, it just progressed from that awareness to eventual breakthroughs, right? Like where I was able to do a few things that used to hurt, and but maybe one thing was messed up. It just, baby steps, little steps are hands down the most important thing. But yeah, the pain was just so immense that it just snapped me to such a heightened awareness that those were the first couple steps that really got me through it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I agree with that. Pain speeds consciousness, right? I don't know if I've ever heard him say that. What I thought you were going to say was, in essence, you kind of mentioned is like the pain teacher, right? Like brings so much awareness. It's like, it's a teacher. It teaches you how to become more conscious and more aware of your body. And, when you talked about, you were so intentional with your steps. I shared this once or twice in my story. A couple months ago, I was probably in the best condition I've ever been in. Ripped, very muscular, and having fun, having a blast. And I was doing like a tire workout and like kind of like rotationally throwing tires, just having fun. And I kind of had a little issue with my knee that I experience every once in a while. I was like, okay, it's fine. I did another one and really just kind of did these like rotational, kind of like a toss. And it was like, and I was like, whoa, what just happened? So I'm like, holy crap. I kind of limp. I like sit down on like the bench. I think it was another tire I was sitting on, and was like, holy crap. I just tore my quad tendon. I literally just tore it. Like I was like, and my knee was numb, like right around the area. I couldn't feel any touch to it. And I was like, holy shit. So speed this up, get to the point. For the past probably 3 months now, I'm just now getting my ability to walk upstairs well without having any pain. And every once in a while, hockey kind of aggravates a little bit, but I love playing hockey still, so I do it. But it's wild how like when you have pain just walking, how in that intentional, like you have to be with your steps, is so enlightening to realize, like, one, thank God, like I'm in somewhat good health, because being like this all the time would suck. And two, also, like, yeah, just having so much more awareness to like, how am I moving? How am I efficiently interacting with the world around me? What am I stepping on? How does my diet and my sleep affect my pain, right? Not just movement and that sort of stuff. So I like that point you bring up. And I think a lot of people will resonate with that.
Yeah, absolutely. If someone's in pain, if someone's in chronic pain, or pain, with doing something so simple as walking, it has to become a focal point, because it's something that's supposed to be inherently easy, right? Inherent, like we shouldn't have to think, quote unquote, shouldn't have to think about walking. And yet we have these experiences sometimes that make the simplest things utterly painful and unbearable. And yeah, I mean, any experience that pushes our boundaries, whether it's pain or whether it's new responsibilities, whatever it might be, those are, the growth is never comfortable. The growth can't be comfortable. It's not meant to be comfortable. And so it's just a matter of like what experience we're dealing with in the moment, and how we're moving through that discomfort, because, things do change, things grow, we grow. And then how are we setting up the environment through our habits or through our lifestyle and things like that to actually progress through that discomfort faster or more efficiently. And after a few injuries, you start learning how you need to go about your life, to make it work. And ideally, we're challenging ourselves not to numb it, to make it go away by numbing it, right? As opposed to like
Yeah.
making it go away by growing through it and growing past it.
And I think that's, a big one. I don't want to get too off topic, but like our Western culture's addiction to just numbing pain, right? Like, oh, here your knee hurts. Oh, here's this painkiller. And something that I learned from Paul Chek, and I think a lot of people think this too, is like, no, don't numb it, because then like the reason why my knee hurts is because there's some imbalance going on in my body, whether that's directly at my knee, probably not, probably more at my ankle and at my hip and at my core and everything, right? Everything moves as an integrated unit. There's something else imbalanced. My body, pain is the very end of the time spectrum of something happened, because your body doesn't want to be limited. It doesn't want to be in pain, but pain is the last resort for it telling you, Matt, you need to stop doing this. Otherwise, you could lose your leg, right? Or like you'll screw up your joint, because the joint is essentially like the end all be all for the musculoskeletal system. If you ruin the joint, like you're screwed up. You can ruin a muscle. That's not inherently that bad. But so it's trying to protect my joint. Stay off your knee. Stop running. Stop playing ultimate frisbee. Stop running upstairs quickly, because you're going to hurt yourself. And I think, and our society is just, no, just numb the pain. It's, I think there's a time and place for like antidepressants and antipsychotics, and I'm by no means an expert, but there comes a time when it's like, okay, like they're not helping that much. Like, why don't we just deal more so with what's causing this stuff? Let's get to the root cause of it, right? Before we start doing all these numbing things that are just going to end up fostering more escapism. And that will just end up compounding the issue more and more and more and more, right? As time goes on, and then it will eventually erupt.
Yeah, I mean, it's a paradigm shift, to begin to view pain as an invitation, right? A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people view it as like a rejection. Like, okay, if there's pain, I need to do whatever I need to do to make it stop. Doesn't matter what the means of that is, whether it's a painkiller, whether it's not doing what they love to do because it hurts them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other thing. A lot of people will hear from their professionals, right? Hey, oh, playing soccer with your kids hurts. Don't play soccer with your kids. But I love playing soccer with my kids. And then this person now becomes depressed, and there's this vicious cycle, right? When it comes
Yeah.
to avoiding pain. And so I think like the conversation does need to be had, in terms of pain with people like that, where that's where like, more so like this kind of life coaching experience based understanding can be far more helpful to people than secular understandings of pain. And pain is the most complex mechanism that we know of,
Mm-hmm.
thresholds of pain, perception of pain. There's no way to really quantify pain. It's a qualitative thing, and that qualitative measurement can be totally skewed based on the person's past, based on their psychological condition, based on mental stories, based on trauma, so many things, based on, there's like 7 different types of sensors, and if
Yeah.
one's overriding the other, then the pain isn't there, and if the pain's overriding, then you can't. So it's just this mind-bogglingly complex thing that oftentimes, it's like leaning into pain or discomfort, really, because oftentimes pain is, I think, more so um, discomfort. I think it would be better posed as discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say pain doesn't exist. Of course, pain exists. But I think a lot of people need to broaden their bandwidth of understanding pain. And I think the only way people get to that point is through experiencing large amounts of pain. And that's why I feel like we do all have these pain teachers in our life to kind of give us that bandwidth of hey, this really sucked, so the next time something doesn't suck this much, you have something to weigh the scales on a little bit better.
Yeah.
And just to kind of finish this pain topic off, I think it's extremely important for coaches. One of the first things that I ask my clients, especially if they're a little bit older, like into their 30s or older, because typically that's when pain starts manifesting chronically for most people. I always ask them if they're on some kind of pain medication or some kind of blocker or something like that. Because as a coach, especially when it comes to physical movement, if you're a movement practitioner or a trainer, you need feedback. And if someone is coming to you and they're doped up and you don't know it, you might be doing some joint positioning or whatever that's far outside their pain threshold, but because they don't have this clear feedback, you don't know what you're actually doing. So I think that's also an important kind of context that I would imagine a lot of kind of entry level trainers may, or entry level coaches may kind of skip over and miss out on being able to have that conversation with their patients, or not patients, clients.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. Yeah. And thank you for emphasizing that, because that's not necessarily something that I specifically ask about. I ask more about like medications and things like that. But it's also incredible how, like, when you ask people like, oh, do you have any past injuries? Or are you on any medications? No. And then like you find out like a month later, like, oh yeah, I shattered my ankle when I was like 10. I was like, oh, you didn't, that didn't come up. It's just funny how we block these things out. But I loved you saying like, no, it's not like pain isn't a thing, but it's more like discomfort. And I love that, because we all know what physical pain feels like, and we all know what mental pain feels like, but that's more like discomfort, right? Like having tons of anxiety about the future, or depression about past experiences and past choices, right? That's a form of pain, and we can learn from that, right? Not being mentally like a 10 out of 10, which I'm sure 99% of the people are, right? No one's in like the perfect situation. Like that's where we kind of learn from, right? And that's something that I've been experiencing a lot over this past year, is like, what do I want to do with my life? What is my true purpose? What makes me happy? What am I willing to sacrifice my time and energy for? So just something to explore. But I definitely want to get into this. Thank you for sharing that. That was an awesome, kind of exploring your pain, my pain, and how we relate this to movement and being coaches, and society's perception of it as a whole. But so I want to give a brief overview of what WEC method is for someone who just has a basic understanding of exercise and strength and conditioning. And then, once we get that basic philosophy of what it is and what it's not, and then we can kind of move into some more specific topics.
Sure. So I guess to put it in my own words, as like a paraphrase, WEC method, I would say, is a lens to view human movement through. It focuses primarily on rotational movement, coiling, which is the end range of rotational movement, and basically how we've developed to use tools with our hands, to wield tools, to throw things, to receive things, and basically just, what is the optimum way for a human to move its body through time and space with locomotive principles. So it's really a set of principles in a sense.
Yeah.
And locomotion, not only like running and walking, but also locomotion in a sense of throwing, like moving any kind of object through space, including the human body, and how to optimize that against this constant force of gravity, which is really the biggest thing. The way that I like to kind of talk to clients about posture and things like that. Like I certainly coach from a WEC method principles as the foundation, but we're really just creating relationships with gravity. And then we're training our nervous system to have options to relate to gravity in a sense. And so WEC method is certainly the gold standard of athletic performance in terms of the way that their principles will translate into athletic movement. And then an athlete is just a highly optimized, highly functioning human body, right? And so it applies to everyone, layperson, elderly, young, doesn't matter. It's across the board for everyone based lens to really view the human body through. And again, it has certainly a focus on rotational movement, because that is by far the most overlooked and also important aspect of human movement. It's really what drives tension, or removing slack out of the body. Like if you were to think of a Chinese finger pull, right? If you could pull it far apart and you could get some tension, but then if you torque it, you actually bring your fingers closer together again.
Mm-hmm.
And so this rotational movement that a lot of people are missing because they're stuck in this blocky two-dimensional sagittal plane can be the missing key to eliminating pain, joint pain, pressure, inflammation. The list goes on and on and on.
Yeah. I like to think of like, it's like the opposite of viewing your body like a Lego man that can only move in this sagittal plane. And I love that analogy of the Chinese finger trap, because I think everyone can kind of visualize that and also like do it with their fingers and be like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. And that helped me out a lot too. So thank you for that. Um, yeah. And the thing I love about, I love how you put it, like, it's more of just like the principles of locomotion. And again, from this biological evolutionary perspective, we didn't lift weights in antiquity, right? Like there's obviously examples of people strength training, but way back then it wasn't necessarily for physical appearance, but it was more so with martial intent, meaning it was more so to be strong, to wrestle, to be a warrior, to have prowess as like an alpha male, because it was probably most likely typically males training. But I love, whether that's the RMT club or the ropes, the ability to train this innate locomotive ability to interact with things in our environment that is parallels the way that we've done it in the past million of years, since we started using tools, since we started hunting, since we started walking long distances and running and sprinting, rather than like the conventional like squats and like bench press that don't really translate that well to certain aspects of life, and more specifically to living for like, again, like the lay person of just trying to live long, be healthy, and be pain free.
Yeah, I like to say sometimes that the conventional fitness model is like a band-aid for a shitty culture.
Fair enough. I like that.
It's very aesthetic, which in a culture that doesn't need to survive, in a sense, the
Mm-hmm.
aesthetically pleasing person to the eye is going to get the girl, is going to get the family, is going to get
Good point.
the lineage to move on. Functionality doesn't really matter to most
Yeah, you're
people.
right. It doesn't matter anymore.
It's about the looks. And so, even less than a few hundred years ago, you needed to be strong because you had to do what you had to do to survive. And now that that's been taken out of the picture, we look at the bodybuilding craze since the 70s and everything. Um, it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, that's a great way to shape your body. It's a great way to shape your musculature. It's a great way to make everyone look like they went through a cookie cutter machine. Like if you look at bodybuilders on stage, there's very little difference between their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's a little more definition here, different shape there, but like you're looking at the same body. And that to me is the most telling issue about conventional training is it's producing the same result for everyone. And everyone's body is similar to a degree, but different to an extent. And so I think we've had enough time as a culture and as an industry, especially the people who are kind of the pioneers of a lot of the more holistic approaches to movement, to realize like, hey, if you only do this, you're not going to be so well off.
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing that I love about WEC method in particular, I'll kind of go through the triangle that they have is
Yeah,
they
I
don't
like.
really, they don't shun anything, which I love. There's no bad posture. There's no right. There's no wrong. There's just, here's information. Here's the most optimum way to make it work. And then do what you want to do with that in order to do it. And so we could touch upon the idea of torsion, which is like torque, right? Like the rotating tension that can be performed bilaterally, right? So even if you're just doing a conventional squat, you're still using some form of torsion. And then there's coiling core training, and I guess to preface this, all of WEC method principles stem from what you're doing with your core, right? So the arms or the
Mm-hmm.
legs, nothing matters more than how your core is rooting into the movement. Like where is your arm rooted in that position? Is it your lats? Is it your obliques? Is it your right oblique and your left lat? Is it your left oblique? And is like, what combination of these two primary drivers, being the obliques on the anterior, the front side, and the lats being on the posterior, the back side, where are your movements stemming from? And so you could do that bilaterally, right? Like if you imagine someone picking up a heavy stone from the ground where they're like kind of hollowed out just because they have to get down super low, they're using that anterior oblique system to drive that up. And then let's say they want to go throw that stone, they pop that chest open, their lats contract, and then boom, now they're in that external torsion where they're using their lats as the primary core driver. And so transitioning between those two systems, utilizing those systems, whether you're bilateral, whether you're coiled to one side, or whether you're rotating from side to side, is basically the triangle there. So you got bilateral, coiling, and rotational movement. Bilateral, everyone does bilateral. Anyone who's gone to a gym knows bilateral torsion. It's you're in the sagittal plane movement. Now, how you're utilizing the core to actually do that movement is where this lens becomes very helpful.
Yeah.
Let's say someone's doing some super heavy back squats and they get totally gassed out. You could go for a really heavy stone lift after that if you want to, because you're using a different system, right? So it's like a strategy to use. Now, coiling is by far the most important piece of the Weck method puzzle because it maximizes end range points, or the bandwidth that you have available for rotational movement. So most people are very stuck neutral, and anytime your head is in the center of your body in the gait cycle, your spine or your knees or your ankles or your hips has to take the brunt of that gravitational force of your body hitting the ground. Now, when you start working into rotational movements and coiling, you start to naturally learn head over foot positioning, which is by far the most substantial position you could be when you're balancing on one foot, which you're never really on 2 feet when you're walking or running. If you're running, you're definitely not on 2 feet. You trip and smack your face. And when you're walking, it's like you're always transitioning from foot to foot.
Yeah.
So how can a human body, like here, actually, Matt, do this for me. Stand up and take like a wide position of the feet. So that way, now what I want you to do is brace your core as if you're like picking up a stone or doing a deadlift or a squat. Well, stand tall, so you don't have to bend over anything. Just stand tall.
Yep.
And then just lift up your right leg, but keep your head in the center. Lift up your right leg and just see what happens.
It's impossible.
It's impossible. Or if you were to do it, the second you lift your leg, you're just going to fall back over.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like I just naturally want to just shift all my weight, that pillar, right over my left foot.
Exactly. And so if you are able to naturally do that in your gait cycle and you land head over foot, head over foot, head over foot, head over foot, you are going to virtually eliminate that gravitational pressure, which is going to, at whatever body you're in, it's going to hit your weakest link. So that could be someone's low back, that could be someone's hip, that could be their knee, could be their neck, doesn't matter. But if they're in the head over foot positioning, they're good. Their body's stacked. It's substantial from a bony standpoint, from a skeletal standpoint, from a fascial standpoint, from a muscular standpoint. Their head over their foot in the gait cycle is going to eliminate a lot of gravitational issues that are accumulating at whatever weak link they have. And so the coiling core is really maximizing that, head over foot position on one side, head over foot position on the other side, along with using the shoulders and the hips to really gain that connection to the core. And then that makes any movement that you do more rooted to the center, more rooted to the core, but also it just gives you that it's just a concept. Like if I'm doing a one-arm press, I'm going to be way stronger if I'm doing a coil and a one-arm press with my head over my foot than if I'm just trying to stay super neutral and do it really slow. I could do maybe 100-pound kettlebell like that and maybe a 70-pound kettlebell like that.
Yeah.
And one of them is going to be more taxing to the joint regardless, and that's going to be that bilateral position. So maximizing all that is kind of the fundamentals of Weck method. And then the rope, it just does that. So that's where like even David says, like the rope, if you learn the rope All the other concepts in WEC method are far easier to understand. And for me, that's kind of how I approached it. So like I dove into the rope for a few thousand hours last year, and then I got into a coil. Like I didn't try and do a coil at first, and then I'm like, makes perfect sense. And then, other people who've never done the rope, it's like harder to actually coach them into these positions because every repetition of the rope requires that rotational movement.
Got you. Okay. Let's hold off on the rope for a second. I want to address a little bit of the WEC, kind of the WEC method stuff and my own thoughts on it. Yeah, that was a lot. It wasn't a lot. I kind of knew a lot of that stuff intuitively, but it was good to hear it from you, hear it from a coach. Do you think that you could maybe send me a video about, or maybe whether it's yours or someone else's, that I can maybe put in the show notes about like coiling core training or that kind of pyramid of those different things if people want to check that out?
The pyramid is more so in the formal training that they have available on their website. I don't know if they have any of that online. And then in terms of the coiling core stuff, to verbalize it maybe a little clearer, and they could just look it up online. They could find it on YouTube. Just type in coiling core WEC method. Ton of videos.
Exactly. That's more so what I was going to link, was like something like that.
Yeah. I mean, you could just even link their YouTube page.
Exactly. They have so much amazing stuff.
So much free content. And so the idea of the coiling core is you're maximizing a long side and a short side
of your torso, right?
Correct. So essentially you're bringing one shoulder to meet the hip as much as possible, and then you're lengthening one shoulder from the hip as far as possible.
Right. And then that short side locks down with that lat.
Yes, it's a combination of the lats and the obliques, depending on where you're actually driving that connection to. A perfect example that someone could do to experience a coil would be to look up the Royal Coil or wall stretch. And that's a really awesome kind of introduction for people to understand like what this is. Like even before I teach a client the rope or before a workshop with the rope, I'll always have them get into these wall stretches and Royal Coils just so that they understand like where I want the movement to be driven from.
Yeah.
Because like your hands are doing one thing, sure, but like where is that actually rooting to? And so if they look up Royal Coil, they'll definitely find something on that. And it's a really powerful move, and it's more so designed as like a primer, also like an isometric primer. You get that tension, you feel the tension, and then you express it in some other kind of movement.
So an example that I think I read in one of WEC's WEC Method, the company, their blog posts, and maybe you could elaborate on this, or if I'm thinking it correctly, then we don't need to go that in depth. But thinking of your body like a bicycle wheel and your spine and your core being the center of that wheel, right? So while the tire, if you can imagine a bicycle wheel, the outside of the tire moves very quickly, just like our feet and our hands and our arms do, right? Then the spokes kind of move a little bit less quickly, right? Like they're not moving as much. They all move in unison with each other, but the outside of the tire moves a lot more distance than the inside of the tire. And the inside of the tire is more like your core. The spokes are kind of like your shoulder complex and your hip complex. And then the outside of the tire are your hands and your feet. And so everything moves in unison, but all the power comes from your core. And how I loved your emphasis on that like intentional aspect of the core. How are you actually using it? And how is that expressed through your appendages, your limbs, I think is like something that is so important and not emulated in a lot of training.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a lot of kind of conventional ideas are very segmented and isolated, right?
Exactly.
So if someone's thinking about a shoulder press, they're not thinking about their core. They're thinking about their front delts. They're thinking about their triceps. They're thinking about their grip. They're thinking about the box, the 90-degree box they're trying to make at the bottom. And, they're thinking about all these other things other than like, well, what's your humerus connected to that's allowing it to be over your head like that, being vertical to your ear like that? And it's going to be your lat. It's going to be your obliques. It's going to be your serratus or your pec or whatever your body's using to get it up there, which obviously we all have one compensatory mechanism or another. You have someone with very rounded shoulders. They're not using their lat. They're using a lot of that front end stuff in their delts. And you have someone who's really like thoracically open, then all they're using is their lats and their shoulder blades, And so, yeah, I love that. And if you just think about it, like how much range of motion do you have in your sphere of space with your hand in comparison to your belly button? Your belly button can't really move so much. But most people just, they don't even think about, well, can it change to add to it? And the other thing is that, you're like, we look at Chris Chamberlain, Savage Protocols. You look at him and his strength is unsuspecting because his arms don't need to be so big to get the weight over his head because it's rooted to a ridiculously strong core. And so, I heard this quote from a fighter. I forget who it is. It's like, they'll look at their opponent's arms and they know if their arms are big, then he can't hit that hard. But if he looks at his glutes and he looks at his low back and he looks at his obliques, and it's like, well, now I might have to move a little quicker here. Because it's not just for show. It's like, that's where that torque, that power is coming from. And so when you have that concept of the bicycle wheel, which is great, if a spoke is out, it doesn't matter so much. If the bearings are bent, it matters a lot.
Yeah.
And so you could also think of that in terms of importance. If you got some tread missing, well, the wheel's still going to roll. If you have a wrench stuck in your spokes, it's not going to move. And so, the closer you get to the core, or the more rooted the movement becomes in the core, you'll find it to be either more or less dysfunctional. And so, or more or less efficient, I guess.
Yeah. Efficiency, right?
Dysfunction could be a dirty word nowadays.
Yeah. You're real about it. It was so funny. Oh God.
It poisons people, thinking they're dysfunctional. They might not be optimal, and that's great. Well, I'm not optimal. I'm strong, but I'm not optimal. But yeah, that dysfunction where it can kind of get people too obsessed on the negative. But yeah, so any movement rooted from your core is going to be stronger because your center is where the exterior is moving from.
Yeah. And, I was out on the beach the other day doing some kind of like the kettlebell RMT, if I'm saying this correctly, I hope so. Kind of like the RMT swing to clean to step and press, right? Powerful move. Very simple. You don't need I only need one kettlebell, or you can even do it with a dumbbell. But these people, it's so funny when I bring out the WEC method stuff and the rope, people like I'm not going to say they flock towards me, but their eyes flock towards me. And it's just, people are like, what is he doing? Right. And it's so funny how many people I get come up to me and approach me about the rope and are like, what are you doing? Like, what are you training for? And I'm just like, life, man. It's so funny. So let's dive into, because I have a hard time explaining to people why they should start spinning this rope around their body, why they should partake in this, like, because I think I think you would agree with me too, if there's a certain positive aspect of learning new skills, especially something that is so beneficial when you start to get more mastery of it, right, and progress through it. So why do you love the rope so much? What do you think its benefits are? And then we can go into like how to implement that and start with it.
If you were to think about the rope, a lot of people, when they look at fitness tools, they think about musculature. Well, how is this training my arms or my shoulders or whatever? The first thing I like to talk to people about in terms of why the rope is important is it's like a software upgrade for your nervous system. So we all have a nervous system, and it's pulsing electricity through our body in order to make anything happen. And so if you could organize that circuitry in a optimum way, no matter what you do, you're going to be better off. And so the way that the rope trains the hands and the nervous system and the rotational components, it just creates this like cocktail of efficiency. And there's no person on the planet that wants to walk like a clunky, I don't care if you're a bodybuilder on stage, everyone wants to walk and move efficiently. It's a physical desire to move with as little energy expenditure as possible. because that leaves more energy for other things.
Mm-hmm.
And so first and foremost, the rope is a neurological patterning device in a sense, or tool. And so you will get stronger, but you might not look like it, but your nervous system is better recruited. And so, I like to share kind of my story with what turned me on to the rope was I purchased it. I saw David online. I'm like, who's this wacky guy? Like, what is he talking about? But it looks cool. So let me try it. I did 1 minute of race and chase or figure eights with both hands in between my set of pull-ups the first time I picked up the rope. And I got like 7 more repetitions than the next set.
Wow.
And it was just because of the priming of my nervous system. And so I was like, whoa, if one set could do that, then what could a lot of more repetition with this do? And the brain is really interesting, and I'm just starting to dive into this kind of stuff. But basically, our sensory input will dramatically affect our motor output,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that our hands rank on importance for sensory and motor output, they're like top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have a tool that can very specifically move your hands with feedback, your brain loves it, absolutely loves it. Anyone who rolls the rope drops into a flow state because it's an externally driven flow mechanism. It's your brain hemispheres have so much real estate in your hands, and the way you're moving them across your body in opposite positions and opposite planes and different movements, it's creating that constant hemisphere communication, and that creates hemisphere synchronization, which then guarantees you to drop into some form of a flow state. And
I
that's
love
where
that.
you're just feeling more optimal. So it's like, if you want to move more efficiently, if you want to move with less pain, if you want to move easier, no matter what, if that means like you're not in so much knee pain when you pick up the groceries, like pick up the rope. If that means you're a power lifter trying to lift 700 pounds off the ground, grab the rope. It doesn't matter. We're talking on a nervous system level, right? We're like jumping the hierarchy, right, from the musculoskeletal system to the thing that runs the musculoskeletal system. And so beyond what that does, it inherently creates rotational movement. And that's by far the most important and most overlooked and most untapped plane of motion for the layperson and even for professional athletes. Like, the athlete might have it in their sport, but then they got their schmuck trainer who's got an NCAA degree putting them through a back squat in the lot, So the rope is just a foundation. It's a nervous system. It's a neurological foundation for a person.
Awesome. Yeah. So funny. My story of how I started doing the rope was, like I said, it was about a year ago. My girlfriend was doing a retreat. So she was away on weekend, and I had some marijuana edibles left over, and I got my rope and I got all the David Weck stuff. I kind of was interested in it for a while. And then I was like, all right, I'm just going to buy the rope, do the easy videos. And I just loved it. I spent like 10 hours in one weekend doing it. And it completely changed for the better the way that I just view movement, locomotion, all types of exercise, and their ability to improve my ability to engage with my environment, to be more efficient with my movement, and also to have more fun. And because my favorite part about using the rope is that I like dance when I use it, especially when I'm not doing there's sometimes when I have a little bit more order to my rope rolling where I'm trying to do more like reps for time or like in between sets and things like that. But my favorite way to do it is just to get outside, get barefoot, put on some, if you're familiar with the Big Booty mixes, maybe you are, maybe you're not, but kind of upbeat, dancey music, and just having a blast and matadoring and dragon rolling. So yeah. And you're right. It is such a flow state and it feels good. It's efficient. Yeah. And it's something that I think everyone can do. And it's also sustainable. And also a part of that is you can ramp up the intensity or slow it down as much as you want in an instant. And it doesn't inherently change the movement at all.
Nor does it make it any better or worse for you. To talk about some concepts with rope flow, right? It's like slow is fast because smooth is fast, because when you're fast, if you're clunky, then you're actually worse off. And again, it's a patterning device. So the more efficient and effective you are in the pattern itself, no matter what pace you're at, that's where you're actually reaping the benefit of it. Because basically what you're doing is you're just digging a groove in your nervous system every time you repeat a pattern. And it says, remember this next time, remember this next time, feel this part of your core drive the rope in that particular position. And so it meets anyone where they're at. If someone is very fragile or frail, then cool, you can do it at 60 beats per minute, 1 second, boom, boom, boom. You could do it with a lighter rope. Another really cool part about rope flow is that the rope is a very non-threatening tool, but poses a challenge threat, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
a flow state is ideally it's optimized when you're doing something that demands high skill, and there's also some form of a risk involved, some kind of a threat. So if for example, if I'm skiing and I'm a great skier, right? So I have high skill, but then I go hit some trees and I have to meet that threat with my skill. And that means I have to drop into flow, because that's the only way that my brain can handle this level of stimulus. And so rather than asking someone who's out of shape or whatever, or who has just more responsibilities on their hands to try and do some black diamond, tree skiing, you put a rope in their hands, and it's like, well, if they're a complete beginner, then they have no skill, which means everything has some risk. Everything has some form of threat or newness or variety, right? Like, you're unexpected. You don't know what's going to happen.
Novel
You're learning
situations are
novelty.
stress.
That's the exact word I was looking for. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And then when you get higher skilled, then the rope's just like, okay, well, there's always more novelty for you to find. Can you hit these 6 movements in a row? Can you maintain cardinal law while you're doing that? Are you losing? Can you not hit your foot? Can you do a jump in it? Can you do it at this pace or at that pace? So the rope provides an endless rabbit hole for someone to enter the flow state in, which is a really unique thing, because oftentimes, like, people get good at skills and then it kind of something drops off. They hit a plateau. They find something where it's like, well, it's not doing that thing for me anymore.
Yeah.
Where the rope it's honest enough for it to be anything, any pattern, any trick, any transition, and so if you're imaginative enough, you could really, like, just endlessly explore these things. And I feel like that's why it's such a unique tool. And my favorite thing about the rope, there's not a single person that doesn't have the cheekiest smile on their face when they hit a new pattern. Not a single person's like, oh yeah, that's cool, sure, I got the underhand sneak. It's like, yes. Like, I got it. And so just that level of, like, playfulness and, like, it kind of gives people this giddiness, this child, because it's like, why can't I do this? It's just a rope. Why is this so damn hard? But again, it doesn't threaten your nervous system, because it's okay. It's just a rope, but it's also hitting the fight and flight patterns, which is sympathetic response, but it's also creating a parasympathetic response because it's not threatening. So it's just this really multi-dimensional tool that's it fascinates me, the ability of its scope of effect.
Yes.
Like, there are people who it's helping their anxiety, it's helping pain immediately. Like, a recent client of mine, I love sharing her story. She was in the process of getting off a lot of pain medication for 15 years, a lot, disc issues, pain, chronic issues. And 1 week of the rope, and it has a lot to do with the pain management. The way the brain can map out the hands is very important, or in terms of how you're sensing your environment. She only needed one dose of pain medication for one whole week. And so like those qualitative gains are so much more important than, well, did those 1,000 reps of the Matadors make my bicep bigger? It's
Yeah.
like we're moving past those old very surface level paradigms, especially with the rope. And the thing is with the rope, like from the outside, it's like, oh yeah, that looks cool, but why should I do it? But then when someone picks it up, it's like, that's why I should do it. Like
Yeah.
everyone has these kinds of realizations with it, and it's a really beautiful thing, and it's something that I'm super passionate about because it can reach so many people. Like one thing you kind of touched on earlier that really resonates with me is I wonder how many people don't engage in some kind of movement or fitness practice only because of what the mainstream perpetuates as what's available for them.
Yes.
Like
100%.
if you have a CEO who's working 90 hours a week and he's putting certain priorities in order beyond trying to have bigger biceps, so why the fuck would I go to the gym? I don't want, that's not going to make me more money.
Yeah.
If you got a really financially driven person, well, it's like, hey, this rope, you do 15 minutes, you're in a flow state, you have more productivity, you're working 2 less hours, but you're making 6 more hours of work for yourself. Like, hey, there's your in with that person, and then maybe they'll want to get a little stronger or whatever. There's so many avenues to reach so many different people. You talk to a gamer, it's like, bro, you want to get into a flow state, roll the rope before you drop into your COD match. Like I'm so far removed from the last freaking thing I owned was a Xbox, an original Xbox, but the thing is the rope has the scope to meet everyone, in my opinion. You got an elderly person, hey, just do this underhand roll with a freaking rope that weighs 100 grams, and grams walking fun, and it's
Yeah.
like, it's fun,
Right. Having fun and also like enjoying the exercise that isn't scary to them. Right. It might be novel, it might be new, and it might be weird at first. But once you get the hang of it, you're like, okay, it's not, I stopped hitting myself in my calf, right? Okay, I kind of get this. And you start building progress. And as a coach, it's our job to emphasize that progress they're making, because I find myself sometimes when I'm coaching being not too negative, but like I have to really like be like, okay, they're obviously not progressing that quick. Let's focus on like some small wins that we can get. And I think that you can build that with the rope. But I love, you didn't inherently say it in my language, but like the low risk, essentially what you're saying is like people, especially if you don't have a lot of competence in weightlifting, in traditional weightlifting, you think that there's a lot of risk, because there is risk if you're not competent in it, right? But like with rope rolling, there's not really any risk. Like there really is not, you're not going to injure yourself. It's very light. The rope is easy to maneuver, and it's more so just like mental discomfort of like, I don't understand how you're doing that. It looks so smooth. And then they pick it up and it's like, whoa, like this is just completely different from anything I've ever done before. And then I think it also depends on the type of person they are, if they actually enjoy it or not. But yeah, brother. So what are you doing with this rope course? What is it? Why did you create it? Who's it for? And what is it all about?
Yeah, so I'll kind of backpedal a little bit. So I have my brand, ET Strength. It was a fitness and lifestyle brand. It's essentially the culmination of all my life experience that I share with my clients from a holistic lens, from a I do just fitness with some people, I do lifestyle stuff with other people, I do both with some people.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, my whole goal is no pain and all gain. So, how can we maximize our lifestyles, our bodies, our movements, our eating choices, whatever it might be, to get the most out of it with the least from it? And so the rope really just embodies that on a physical level. And so,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, I was in more pain when I was 18 than I've ever been. And that really struck a chord with me. I was like, I felt like I was 80 years old, And so I could only, we can only imagine the level of pain that most people are going through, whether it's mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, some combination of the both, or all of them, people are experiencing something. We never know what anyone's walking around with. And so as a coach or as an influencer, quote unquote, it's like the rope is the simplest way for me to get to anyone to make their life less painful with more gains.
Mm-hmm.
Um, whether it's a mental thing, boom, the rope hits that flow state. You're guaranteed to somehow have a mental benefit from it. Emotional, mental and emotional are very players. Physicality adds to the emotions. Spirituality certainly plays a role in the emotions. And so if there's something that could kind of mesh the worlds together, then boom, you got something for that. Physically, right? You have a tool that's literally the program of walking and running and throwing, which are the most important human movements ever.
Mm-hmm.
And so the rope is just this holistic embodying thing that can reach everyone. So I created my rope flow course, so the ET Strength Rope Flow Foundations course, and it's essentially it's designed to be a step-by-step guide to get someone who's never touched a rope, never considered rope flow, never even heard of it, to pick up a rope, learn the basics, learn the intermediate stuff, learn the advanced stuff, to become proficient in the flowing aspect of it. So it's broken down into 3 levels. The first level is just learning the basic concepts and patterns. The second level is putting those concepts and patterns to work with some dynamic movement and some flows, as well as some more high intensity applications, like workout kind of sequences. And then the third level is more so conceptual and templative, right? So it's more like a template for people to have, like, a bunch of flows to pick and choose from that I think embody a lot of the advanced principles. And so it's 73 videos, it's over 5 hours of content. And I'm having some incredible feedback from people with the way it's articulated in comparison to what they could find online or for free or with other stuff online. And it's just been a really humbling experience to be able to create a piece of content and then be able to share it kind of unlimitedly. Like, I look at my website hits and I'm like, I got people in Japan going to my site. It's been one of the coolest things for me to be able to have that far of a reach with something that really, to me, the rope absolutely saved my body, like, hands down. And if someone has a body that works with them and for them as opposed to against them, like that to me is such a foundational piece of the puzzle where that could drastically change the world. If someone's more comfortable and feeling better in their body, then that person is better in their relationships. They're better with their friends. They're better at work. They're more efficient. They're more imaginative, right? And so if I could provide that to as many people as possible, that's really my goal with the courses, is help people have fun, help people try something new, do with some good structured and articulate content in a way that's step by step, easy to follow. And some of the responses that I get are just amazing. And so that's kind of the bulk of what people know me for online so far. And then yeah, I love lifting heavy stuff, and I have some pretty alternative health views. And yeah, so lots of fun, and yeah, the rope course is for everyone. I have
love it.
people who are in jujitsu, who are athletes, who are Parkinson's patients, who are anxious, who have chronic pain. It's all over the map, and it's really such a beautiful thing to be able to cover that wide of a spectrum with one thing.
Yes.
And so, if you're listening to this, if you resonate with any of the stories, if you've ever been in deep pain with your body, or if there's compensation or quote unquote dysfunction, right? And pain, and you feel sticky or stuck, then I'm just humble yourself and pick up the rope. And the best part is we all look the same when we first pick it up. Like I've posted some before and afters, and I look at myself from even just a year ago. I'm like, man, I was horrible.
Yeah, it's
And
crazy.
like on my Instagram story, it's like, yeah, Matador's looking good, and I look like garbage, But that's the thing, is anyone who's good at the rope, they know that humbling process of something that seems so simple, yet for whatever reason is so difficult.
I love it, brother. So guys, definitely, I will link in the show notes. You can check out a link to Edward's page, all of his content, his Instagram profile. You can check that stuff out. You can get in contact with him and have an amazing time with it. I've been looking for someone. I contemplated make my own rope course. I don't think that not having like a WEC method certification and not having that background, I don't feel called to actually accumulate something like that. So I love that we could connect and I could, help you out and also help our listeners out and provide them with a trusted source that is going to give them an individual kind of process of understanding the ropes and something that's really helped me out physically, mentally, emotionally, and go from there. So, Edward, thank you so much for being on here. I think people are going to love this conversation, whether that's your background, WEC methods, principles, or rope rolling. I think people are really going to enjoy it.
No, thank you so much, brother. It was an honor and had a good time chatting with you.
All right, guys, thank you for listening. And that's it for the show. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that episode. If you did, please give me a shout out on the gram, screenshot this episode, tag me and Edward in it. We'd love to see your feedback, your insights, and know that people are enjoying this episode. So I love this conversation. I learned a lot. As you can tell, I'm fascinated by the WEC method principles, how I can apply it in my own training, all the benefits of it, and rope rolling and all the flow state mental benefits, as well as the little software upgrade you get from rope rolling. I think it's some really fun stuff. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll talk to you soon.